and life in coral reefs. Those are the two ecosystems we are going to focus on today. Our last class, we are going to focus on deep sea ecosystems. So does anyone have any questions before we go ahead and get started? All right, well, the way I wanted to start class today was I want to do a little bit of brainstorming. I would like to go to our whiteboards and let's take a look at what I'm putting up there right now. I want to try to brainstorm some characteristics or descriptions of polar regions. Now, when I say polar regions, I mean the Arctic or Antarctica. Antarctica. I want you guys to come up with either some characteristics. Oh, perfect. Whoever's writing up there right now. Very cold, always snowy. Great. Or some animals that live there would work as well. Come up with some characteristics or descriptions of the Arctic regions or the polar regions. Polar bears, fantastic. I'm going to give you guys about 3 or 4 minutes to come up with some. Hey, anyone have any last-minute additions they can put up here? All right, great job. Let's take a look at what you guys came up with. We have some great ones up here. So we're looking at our whiteboard again. And let's see, we have very cold. Perfect. Oops. My mouse is getting caught here. Always snowing. Well, it isn't always snowing, but it definitely is snowy. There are orcas, fantastic, seals, polar bears, penguins, and on the extremes of the planet, very nicely done. Polar bears, icebergs, coldest places on Earth. Great, great job. Smile face for you. Yay! I'm very pleased with those answers. So let's switch from our whiteboard and let's go to our PowerPoint. Now the PowerPoint I'm going to show you today, we're going to skip around a little bit in. It's life in the polar regions. So here we have a map of the top, if you were looking at a globe, of the top of the globe, looking down. In the center of the map, there is the Arctic Ocean, and you can see it if you look carefully at the image. You can see Canada, Russia, Greenland, Iceland. There's a red circle all around the center of this map. Inside that circle is what is considered the Arctic region. So when we are talking today about the Arctic region, we are talking about the area that is inside of this circle. Oh, and let me go back to it for 1 second. There are watery regions in here, which is kind of where we're going to focus since this is a marine biology class. But there are also land masses in this region. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at some unique animals that live in this region. We've done some work on specific types of animals. We've looked at marine mammals. We've looked at bony fish. Now we're going to look at all animals in an ecosystem and how they interact with each other. So one of the really cool ones that live in this area is a tundra or a whistling swan. Before ballpoint or fountain pens, the quills of whistling swans were a common implement used for writing. Thousands of these birds were killed for their feathers, and the whistling swan was driven almost to extinction. However, because of their isolation, the Arctic populations have persisted. Now, this whistling swan mates for life. So once they have a mate, they stay with that mate forever. And they can live in the cold areas of the tundra, just like all the animals we will look at today. Another bird that lives in this area along with other areas is the herring gull. The herring gull is one of the larger members of the gull family. He's monogamous, which means he stays with the same mate forever as well. They build their nests on rocky coastlines in the Arctic. They have a cosmopolitan feeding habit, which means they kind of eat as they go. And they have a very good memory of predators and where those predators live. So they stay away from areas that have lots of predators. One of the main predators of herring gulls are sharks. Now here's an Arctic tern. The Arctic tern is a very unique species. It is the only species that migrates from the Arctic to the Antarctic. They live and migrate in very large groups of up to 100 pairs of birds. They can dive up to 10 meters deep into the water, so they can go down 30 feet in the water, and they can live for 30 years or more. One of the things I just said was that the Arctic tern migrates from the Arctic to the Antarctic. So let's take a look at migrating and what exactly that means. Lots of animals that live in the Arctic migrate. Anne or DeAndre, do you know what it means to migrate? Anyone want to chime in? What does it mean for an animal to migrate? Go ahead, Anne. You know what? My speaker was muted. Anne, what does it mean to migrate? Actually, it might be your mic because I still can't hear you, but I am hearing other beeps. DeAndre, are you able to hear? Okay, no. Anne, do you want to write it in the text chat for me? What does it mean for an animal to migrate? No one? Okay, when an animal migrates, it means it moves a long distance between two places. Very good. To travel from one place to another depending on the time of the year. Awesome. Lots of animals migrate. Lots of marine mammals migrate. We talked about the whales, and we looked at humpback whales migrating. Caribou are an animal that migrates. The Arctic tern is another animal that migrates. They have a direct flight of 6,165 miles. They fly along the coastlines. So if you look at the green arrows here, those are showing the flight patterns of Arctic terns. And scientists basically rely on observers like you or I who might be living in some of these areas to say, hey, look, I see some Arctic terns. Another way scientists determine where Arctic terns go is by banding them as chicks. So basically they take a little tag, almost like a zip tie, and put it on the leg of a baby Arctic tern. They let one go, or a group of them go, where the star is on the map on the right. And they were able to track them along that blue or purple dotted line. Unfortunately, they kind of lost their tags, and they're not sure if the animals got eaten or if the tags fell off after a given amount of time. But that is as far as they were able to track them. Now, a puffin. A puffin is an animal in the Arctic that surface dives to swim after small fish. They catch and hold them in their bill until it has what they consider a full load, until their mouth is full. Some have known to carry up to 61 fish in a single trip. So they are quite the fishermen. They arrange the fish in their bills crosswise, using its tongue to hold them against the roof of their mouth while they are catching the next fish. The roof of its mouth has spines on it that help to hold the fish in place. They are not pretty flyers, but they can reach speeds of up to 88 kilometers an hour. And unfortunately, they are also not graceful landers. When they arrive on land, they often end up crashing. They do not land nicely like a robin does. Here's another cool fish that lives in the Arctic, or actually our first fish that we've looked at, and it's called a lanternfish. Lanternfish are deep-sea fish. They vertically migrate. So instead of moving from the Arctic to the Antarctic, they move from deep water to shallow water. Now the picture on the left is a drawing of a lanternfish. The picture on the right is an actual lanternfish picture that was taken. Lanternfish have something special called photophores. Photophores are lights on their head and their body. Now if you look at the picture on the left, the drawing, you can see the photophores, the little lights that kind of go along the bottom of the fish. They emit or they give off a level of light that's low enough to match the light coming from the surface of the sea, and this allows them to conceal or camouflage themselves from predators. Now, this is my son's favorite animal that lives in the polar regions. It is the Greenland shark. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the Greenland shark before. It's a type of shark that not many people are aware of, but they are pretty cool, if I must say so myself. Greenland sharks are the largest fish, because remember, sharks are fish, in northern waters. Their name, their scientific name, is Salmonopsis microcephalus. It translates into the tiny-headed sleeper. They swim so slowly that it is often difficult to tell whether or not this huge shark is alive or dead. This huge shark is a scavenger, which means it shears or cuts huge chunks of flesh off of dead seals, dead whales, or munches on the remains of other dead fish or marine organisms. Let's take a look at a real picture of this animal. Here is a Greenland shark. They're a shark that not a lot is known about because they live in a very unpopulated area of the world, and they live very deep, are very solitary, and very difficult to study. Okay, and as I said, this is what I wanted. So I showed you some animals that live in the polar regions. Now I want to talk about how they all are connected. And they are all connected in a food web. Now you may have worked with food webs or food chains before. Anyone know the difference between a food web and a food chain? This is a food web up here. Anyone want to take a shot? The difference between a food web and a food chain. Okay, a food web is a group of food chains. A food chain would be something, eat something, eat something. So an example of a food web would be shrimp is eaten by cod, which is eaten by gulls. That's a food chain. One straight line with a couple of animals in it. A food web is a large group of food chains. It shows lots of different animals and what they eat and how everything interacts together. Anyone want to take a guess as to why food webs are so important when you are studying an ecosystem? Oh my goodness, you guys are so quiet. DeAndre, let's hear. Why do you think food webs are important when you are studying an ecosystem?
So you can see what they eat or what they aren't.
Awesome. You can see what eats what and how all the animals interact with each other. So let's take a look at this food web that you see up here. Now the top predator on this food web is a polar bear. He is at the top. He is the one, basically, that eats everything else. Now he's not going to go and eat a little crustacean. However, he'll eat the seal that eats the cod, that eats the amphipod, that eats the crustacean. So all of those animals are related. Now what would happen if for some reason in this ecosystem there were no more mussels? For whatever reason, all of the mussels in our Arctic food web become extinct. Now, Anne, let's take a second and see if we can get your mic working. If you go over to the far left-hand side and you look at that wrench at the bottom of your screen, the orange wrench, click on it, click on microphone, and make sure that the correct microphone is selected. So what do you think? What would happen, and I'll put the question in the text chat too, what would happen if all of a sudden mussels became extinct from our food web? What effect would that have on the rest of the animals in this food web? All right, Anne, go ahead. Let's see if we can hear you this time.
The other animals would be very affected since it's a food web, so they're all related. I guess they would like die or something would happen to them and then learn to eat something different. All
right, fantastic. I was able to hear you that time. Great. You're right. what would happen is some of the animals would die and would be infected. Like, let's look at what eats these mussels. So if we go up our food chain, or our food web, the eider duck eats these mussels. So if all of a sudden there were no more mussels in our food chain, it might cause the ducks to die. And then if the ducks die, they're a food source of the Arctic fox. So it might cause a decline in the population of the Arctic fox. So everything is very, very connected. Now let's go over to our whiteboard. And what I want you guys to do is, I want you to come up with a food chain or food web, whichever you would like, with at least 4 animals in it. I'm going to give you each your own box here since there's only 2 of you here today. Okay, and you don't have to draw pictures of the animals. You can just go ahead and write the animal names. Come up with a food web or a food chain with 4 animals in it. I'm going to go ahead and make one down on the bottom. So that's my food chain. Grass is eaten by rabbits, which are eaten by coyotes, which can be eaten by bears. If you just want to list yours like DeAndre's doing, you don't have to worry about drawing the arrows. That's fine. You can just list them in order. All right, looks good, guys. So let's see, we have the benthic crustacean is, oh no. There we go. Anne, sorry about that. Let me move off my eraser. We have the benthic crustacean is eaten by mussels, which is eaten by the elder duck, which is eaten by the Arctic fox. Great job. And DeAndre went up and created his own. He has shrimp is eaten by fish, which are eaten by sharks, which can be eaten by colossal squids. Awesome job. So you see how it works. Even if you only have one or two animals, they all are connected to each other. Okay, we're just going to look at a couple more large marine mammals. A walrus is a very social animal that gathers by the hundreds in the Arctic. Okay, I want to show a couple more pictures to you guys, and then we're going to flip over to coral reefs. So give me 1 second. Here we go. I want to look at some penguins. So here you have spotlight on penguins. There are lots of different types of penguins. There are macaroni penguins, which are the most numerous of all the world's penguins, with an estimated population of over 9 million breeding pairs. They breed on the peninsulas and many outlying islands of Antarctica. So they are very protected. There are not a lot of man-made hazards to these penguins. The emperor penguins are the largest penguins in terms of size, but they are found only on the mainland, not on islands. The Adélie penguins are the penguins that are the most studied. They're also the penguins that most often you see in aquariums or zoos. They are named after an area of the peninsula called the Adélie Land. They're very good camouflagers. And then there are the king penguins. Like the emperor penguins, king penguins make no nests. And instead, they lay a single egg, which they hold on their feet for the entire incubation period, which, if you remember back to sea turtles, is how long it takes an egg to hatch. And the incubation period for king penguins is about 55 days, so pretty close to sea turtles, which was 60 days. The adaptation, they keep their eggs on their feet, allows them to breed in very cold terrain because they don't need to build a nest. So they don't need plant material or leaves to build a nest to keep their eggs warm. Their egg is kept warm by the heat coming off of their lower body and their feet. So that is where we are going to stop with polar seas. That's about halfway through class, and we're going to switch over to the coral reef. All right, so coral reefs. Raise your hand if you are, or think you are, familiar with some animals that live on the coral reefs. All right, fantastic. I would expect that both of you are pretty familiar with animals on the coral reef. So before we talk about the animals on it, we need to know what on earth is a coral reef. Well, a coral reef is a structure formed by coral polyps, which are tiny animals that live in colonies or groups. The coral polyps form a hard, almost stony, branching structure made of limestone. New polyps constantly attach to the old coral and gradually build a reef. Okay, we're going to flip through this. Here in this picture, wherever you see the yellow in the ocean, are where there are living coral reefs. Now, coral reefs are alive. They are constantly changing, and they are constantly moving. However, since they grow so slowly, they move very slowly. They are usually found near land in shallow, warm, salt water. They need lots of light because lots of photosynthesis occurs on coral reefs. They need to be in a tropical temperature where the average temperature is between 70 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. And most types of coral cannot survive below 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So where I am in Connecticut, there are no coral reefs. Down in Florida, plenty of coral reefs. They like the warm waters. The coral reef has plants in it called phytoplankton. They are microscopic and they use photosynthesis at their energy. These phytoplankton are the basis for all oceanic food chains. And there's a picture of the phytoplankton on the bottom right of your slide. You cannot see phytoplankton if you just look. You need to have a microscope or a hand lens in order to see the phytoplankton. And here are some other coral reef plants called algae. There's green algae, like the picture on the top. There's red algae, like the picture in the middle. And there's brown algae that takes lots of different forms. Basically, if the algae is green, it is called a green algae. The color of the algae changes based on the different chemicals that are in the plant. It's very similar to when the leaves change color in the fall. They change because different chemicals are present, different sugars, different chemicals, different enzymes in the leaves. There are also seaweeds and seagrasses. Here is a picture of some turtle grass, which is very common along coral reefs. Now, the Great Barrier Reef is the largest coral reef in the world. It is over 1,257 miles long. It's off the coast of northeast Australia. And if you look at the picture on the bottom right, there's a light blue area. That is the Great Barrier Reef. Now, the Great Barrier Reef only grows about 1 inch per year. Does anyone want to read about the species of animals that live on the Great Barrier Reef? Either of you want to volunteer to read? The diversity of the animals there? Go ahead, DeAndre.
They have 1,500 species of fish, 400 different types of coral. They have 4,000 mollusks, 500 species of sardine, 213 species of birds, 16 species of sea snakes, 6 species of sea turtle, and birds visit during the winter.
Awesome, thank you so much. So if we take all of those different animals, think of the gigantic food web that we could build that goes or is associated with a coral reef. The possibilities are endless. Now, here's a picture of a coral. Coral and coral polyps are the basis for coral reefs. There's a couple of different parts of coral. The top part are the tentacles. When the coral is feeding, remember the coral is an animal, it sends these tentacles out. It kind of opens up like a flower. And the petals on the top of the flower are the tentacles, and they're reaching into the water trying to get phytoplankton. They catch this phytoplankton, and it goes into their digestive sac, which is in the center of their body. They digest it, and they use the energy to survive and to grow. They have a tough skeletal body. If you've ever seen coral washed up on shore, you know it feels almost like a rock. It's a lot more fragile, but it's hard. Let me get to a couple pictures here for you guys. Okay, so here we have some coral reef creatures. There are lots of tropical fish. There are angelfish, like the picture on the right. There are John Dories. There are butterfly fish, seahorses, octopus, and reef sharks. Now, seahorses are an animal that is very, very fascinating. So let's take a look at seahorses. There's a picture of a seahorse on the left. Seahorses have a couple of interesting facts. They are very weak swimmers. Most of the time, seahorses like to stay in shallow, hidden areas. They'll find a part of the coral reef where there's not a strong current, where they can kind of tuck in and live. They do not travel far. The female seahorse lays eggs, and then the male carries them in a pouch until they are born, or until they hatch. They're the only animal in which the father actually gives birth. Their body, even though they are small and look so fragile, is actually covered with tiny armored plates. So here is a sample food chain in the coral reef. Now, notice I said food chain. It's one line where there is no interconnection in this example. Phytoplankton, like we talked about, are tiny creatures that use photosynthesis to make their energy, so they use the sun. They're eaten by zooplankton, which are tiny microscopic animals. The zooplankton are eaten and filtered by coral. Starfish can eat coral. An octopus can eat starfish. And moray eels can eat an octopus. So this would be just one sample food chain of the coral reef. Now, coral reefs are very endangered. Coral reefs are endangered for a couple of reasons. One reason that coral reefs are endangered is from ocean pollution. Coral is very sensitive, and even small changes in the amount of sunlight or the amount of chemicals that they get changes their ability to reproduce. If the corals can't reproduce, they die, and then essentially the coral reef will die. Another threat to coral reefs is dredging off the coast. Now, when companies dredge, or towns or people, they dig up everything along the coast, including coral reefs. Other dangers to coral reefs are people. Lots of people like coral, either to make, some people use coral as decorations in their house. And some people take coral live and use it in their fish tanks inside. Careless collection of coral is a major threat to coral reefs. Sedimentation, which is dirt being stirred up and brought to different areas of the ocean, is also a major threat to coral reefs. And there's a lot of agencies or groups trying to protect coral reefs. One of the main ones in Australia, because remember that's where we said the largest coral reef is called Ocean Guard. Now, Ocean Guard's focus is preserving the Great Barrier Reef. They're doing this through education, and by fighting the invasion of crown-of-thorns starfish. Now here on the right-hand side is a picture of crown-of-thorns starfish attacking coral. Now you might be thinking, starfish are so slow, how on earth do they attack something? Well, starfish are slow, but coral is slower. The crown-of-thorns starfish attacks the coral reefs and eats the coral, causing the reef to die. Another agency here in the U.S. that's trying to protect coral reefs is called Reef Relief. Reef Relief is a Florida-based company. They have something called coral nurseries where they are trying to make coral and then plant it or seed it, they call it, back into the ocean so that it has a chance to mature. They're also promoting conservation legislation. So, looks like my video froze there. I'm going to turn it off. So let's think about coral reefs and polar seas. And let's try to compare them. So I'm drawing a chart up on our whiteboard. First, we talked about polar seas. Second, we talked about coral reefs. And the middle column, we're going to do characteristics of both. So let's think about where we can put some of the stuff that we learned today. So polar seas, I'm going to put in the Arctic regions. Coral reefs, I'm going to put the largest off Australia. And for a characteristic of both, I'm going to put need to be protected. Go ahead and see if you can come up with any characteristics to go in any of these columns. Or if you can't think of a characteristic, give me an example of an animal that lives in that area. Okay, go ahead and put some up here. Don't be shy. Okay, come up with a few more. Oh, hold on, there we go. All right, so let's take a look what you guys came up with from today's class. The polar seas are Arctic regions. They do not have a reef. Very good. They have icy water. Has an animal population that doesn't exist anywhere else. Very good. We could also put in there the Arctic terns that migrate, or the penguins. Characteristics of both, they need to be protected. Very good. They have different types of fish. Perfect. Coral reefs, they need a great temperature to live. They provide home for fish. Okay, I think we could also add, my mouse isn't here, some other six. So for characteristics of both, let's say they both are specific climates. Polar is cold. Coral reef is hot. They both have diverse food webs. Even though they are different, they are both very complicated food webs. They both rely on phytoplankton as a primary food source. Very good. Now, since this is our last week of class, next week is our last week of class. I want you guys to pick the topic. Now, since you two are the only two here, you get the only two votes. So I am going to send you a quiz. We are going to cover definitely deep sea. Okay, we are definitely doing deep sea. So what would you like to cover besides the deep sea? Beach regions, estuaries, swamp marshes. Oh, we're going to do an ecosystem. We already did each group of animal, Anne. So let me give you the choices, and we're going to do open regions of ocean. We're going to pick from these choices what you would like to cover besides deep sea. And I'm going to make sure I write it down. All right, and you two are both picking beaches. So, for session 1, we are going to do deep seas and beaches for our last class. Now, also during our last class, you guys are going to present what is by far my favorite homework assignment that you do this year. Now, we have talked about marine mammals, sea turtles, deep sea fish. We have talked about phytoplankton. We have talked about bony fish, sharks. We have talked about almost every type of creature that lives in the ocean. For this week's homework, you are going to create your own marine creature. your own marine creature, you are going to send me a picture. So, this creature doesn't exist. So you can either draw it or make something on the computer. Whatever you would rather. If you draw it, just either take a picture of it and send it to me, or if you have a scanner, you can scan it to me. So you're going to send a picture and a description of your animal. Where does it live? What does it eat? Who eats it? And why do you like it? You might want to include what color it is. Does it camouflage? What is special about your animal? I'm going to share one with you so you know what I'm looking for. So, I'm going to make a very rough drawing here because I have a very difficult time drawing. And so here we have my animal. And what I might write is my animal is called an elefish. My elefish is gray and white so that it camouflages in the ocean. It has a long trunk, like an elephant, to help it eat food off the bottom of the ocean. It swims very slow and has a large tail and dorsal fin to help keep its balance. So that's my description. Now I'm also going to say, where does it live? It lives in shallow waters, so it can easily see its prey. Its prey includes crabs, mollusks, and amphipods. It is eaten by large sharks and marine mammals. I like the elefish because it combines two of my favorite things, elephants and fish. Okay, and that is what I am looking for your homework. Now, I would love to have a more awesome drawing than my drawing. However, I understand that not everyone is artistic. So I know that we may not get awesome drawings from everybody, but as long as you are attempting, then that is all that matters. Does anyone have any questions on that homework assignment? Oh, where did it go? I'm not quite sure where it went. But does anyone have any questions on the homework assignment?